Let's talk about consistency, not the fluffy Instagram filtered version, but the real neurobiologically grounded, emotionally gritty, effortful repetition of behaviors that shape who we become. If you're waiting to feel inspired every day, you've already lost the game, because inspiration, like dopamine, is fleeting. It rises and falls. It's a spike, not a stable state. And while you can ride that spike for a moment, you cannot build your life on it. What you need to build your life on is something far more stable, something trainable, something that exists whether or not you feel like showing up. That something is consistency. And in order to cultivate it, you must be willing to override what you feel in favor of what you've committed to. You see, the nervous system is not designed for your dreams. It's designed for survival. Every time you try to push against the grain of comfort, every time you disrupt the groove of what is easy and pleasurable, your system will resist. It will offer you excuses, fatigue, procrastination, impulsivity. These are not moral failings. These are biological signals trying to bring you back to baseline, but you are not required to obey them. In fact, if your aim is growth, you must develop the capacity to override them, not once, but daily. You must force yourself to be consistent, especially when you least feel like it. Consistency is not a talent. It's not something you're born with or without. It's not genetic luck. It's a process of neuroplasticity. It's sculpted through action, repeated action, that carves new pathways in the brain. Neurons that fire together, wire together. So the more you engage in a specific behavior, the easier it becomes to repeat. But here's the catch. The first phase is always the most energetically costly, because in the beginning, you're not operating on automation. You're forcing something that feels unnatural. You're dragging your body and mind into alignment. That phase is painful. It's marked by friction, and it's where most people quit. Not because they can't succeed, but because they misinterpret resistance as a signal to stop rather than a signal to push. You have to understand that your brain is a prediction machine. It likes what it knows, even if what it knows is dysfunction, even if what it knows is avoidance. So when you try to be consistent with something new, let's say waking up earlier, going to the gym, studying, working on a creative craft, it doesn't have that pattern encoded yet. There's no efficiency in that neural network. So your system says, this is hard, this is uncomfortable, this must be wrong. But that's a lie. Discomfort is not danger. Friction is not failure. It's just the price of rewiring. And here's what's even more important. Consistency isn't about intensity. It's about frequency. High intensity followed by burnout is just another form of sabotage. It's ego disguised as effort. What actually builds change is daily repetition at manageable doses. If you want to reprogram your habits, don't aim to be heroic. Aim to be unrelenting. 10 minutes of focused effort every day will outperform 1 hour of chaotic, irregular hustle once a week. The nervous system favors predictable patterns. If you give it those patterns regularly enough, it will start to automate the behavior for you. And once a behavior becomes automated, you no longer need willpower to do it. You just do it. But here's the paradox. To reach that point, you must rely on willpower in the beginning. You must force the behavior before it becomes easy. You must install discipline where there is no desire. That's the initiation phase. And during this phase, you're going to experience massive resistance. You will feel the gravitational pull of your old identity, who you used to be, how you used to think. You will encounter friction, not just externally. Your thoughts will try to negotiate. You'll hear voices that say, just this once, skip it, you'll start again tomorrow. That voice is not you. It's your nervous system trying to protect itself from the metabolic cost of change. Override it again and again. And how do you override it? not with emotion, but with behavior. Motion comes before emotion. Don't wait to feel ready. Readiness is a myth. Readiness is the nervous system asking for certainty. And certainty never comes before action. You want to feel confident? Take action. You want to feel motivated? Take action. You want to feel strong? Take action. Because the brain rewards behavior, not the other way around. Dopamine, the chemical of motivation, is not a reward for thinking. It's a reward for moving. When you step into action, even a small step, you signal to your brain that this is important. That signal leads to reinforcement. That reinforcement leads to repetition, and repetition leads to identity. Identity is not something you discover. It's something you build brick by brick, day by day, behavior by behavior. Every time you show up for yourself, especially when it's hard, you cast a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. And over time, those votes add up. They create a narrative, not in words, but in neural structure. Your brain starts to believe, this is who I am. I am someone who shows up. I am someone who finishes. I am someone who doesn't quit. But again, this doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design, by consistency. And consistency must be forced deliberately, consciously, until it becomes reflexive. You must be willing to be mechanical before you can be masterful. Think about any high performer, a world-class athlete, a prolific writer, a disciplined entrepreneur. None of them rely on how they feel. They rely on what they've built. Routines, systems, rituals. And all of those were, at some point, unnatural. All of those required friction and force in the beginning. So if you're waiting for it to feel good, you're waiting too long. If you're waiting for the perfect time, you're waiting forever. Force the behavior first. Let the feelings follow. There will be days when you feel aligned, when the energy is there and the work flows and the discipline feels easy. Those days are gifts, but they are not the metric. The true test is what you do when the energy is absent. What you do when the mood is low, what you do when nobody is watching and the stakes feel invisible. That's where consistency is built. In the dark, in the quiet, in the repetition of what seems small but is actually everything. The world will try to seduce you with novelty, new goals, new hacks, new distractions. But mastery is not about novelty, it's about depth. And depth requires repetition. Repetition requires boredom. And boredom is not the enemy, it's the doorway to excellence. Force yourself to pass through it again and again. Because the truth is, the most successful people are not those who love the process every day. They are those who submit to it regardless of how they feel. They are those who understand that consistency is not glamorous, it's gritty, it's quiet, it's uncelebrated, but it is the single greatest predictor of success. When you force yourself to be consistent, you begin to trust yourself. You begin to believe in your own follow-through. And that self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Not arrogance, not bravado, but real grounded confidence. The kind that cannot be taken from you because it's not based on external validation. It's based on internal evidence. Evidence that you can rely on yourself, that you can follow through, that you can do hard things not once, but every day. And when you start to live this way, you start to notice something remarkable. You no longer need to fight for motivation. It shows up on its own. You no longer need to hype yourself up. You just begin because you've trained your nervous system to associate effort with identity. And when that happens, consistency becomes who you are, not something you do. But again, you must force it first. You must wake up, act, repeat, long before it feels automatic. And every time you do, you make the next time easier. You build momentum, you build circuitry, you build strength. But do not expect it to be easy. Expect it to be worth it. Expect it to be necessary. Because in a world full of noise, of distraction, of fleeting motivation, the ability to be consistent, to force yourself to show up, is a superpower. And it's one you can train, not overnight, but over time, through action, through repetition, through deliberate, uncomfortable effort. So stop waiting, start moving, start forcing, because that is the way, that is the path. And the longer you walk it, the more it becomes yours. You have to recognize that your environment is constantly shaping your ability to be consistent. You might think you have a discipline problem, when in reality you have a context problem. The brain doesn't operate in isolation. It responds to cues, visual, auditory, social, even olfactory. If your surroundings are cluttered, noisy, chaotic, or filled with stimuli that cue distraction, you will need to exert far more willpower to maintain consistency. But if you construct an environment that supports the behaviors you're aiming to install, you reduce the energy cost of each repetition. This isn't just about motivation, it's neuroeconomics. It's about preserving energy for execution, not for decision making. One of the best ways to force consistency is to remove the need for choice. Decide once, then automate. Build your behaviors into the structure of your day so you don't have to think about whether you're going to act. You simply do. Every decision is a potential point of failure. Every hesitation is a friction point. If you want to be consistent, you have to reduce friction. Lay your clothes out the night before, set your alarm, and put your phone across the room. Write down exactly what you'll do and when. These micro decisions are not trivial. They're leverage points. They are the architecture of consistency. And when it comes to executing the task, whatever it is, your internal narrative matters more than you think. If you approach your practice, your work, or your training with a mindset of resistance, telling yourself this sucks, I don't want to do this, you're reinforcing a neural loop of avoidance. But if you approach it with even a trace of neutrality, this is just what I do, you begin to unlink the emotional weight from the task. And over time, that neutrality can shift toward positive anticipation. That's when you start craving the behavior, not because it's easy, but because it aligns with who you've become. But again, this is not an emotional transformation, it's a neurochemical one, and it is earned. Your nervous system is listening to everything you say to yourself. It listens not only to the words, but to the tone. Self-talk matters. If your internal language is filled with softness, with permission to negotiate with backdoors and escape hatches, you will break the loop every time. But if your internal language is command-based, clear, firm, and consistent, your system begins to follow. Not because you're being harsh, but because you're being precise. And precision is power when it comes to behavioral change. You must also understand that consistency compounds, but the compounding is invisible at first. You might show up every day for weeks or months and see no change. That's normal. Neural adaptation doesn't happen on your schedule. It happens when the system decides there's enough signal strength to justify the upgrade. And that upgrade only happens if the signal is frequent. The beautiful part is that the rewards eventually come all at once, not linearly, exponentially. Suddenly you look up and you've transformed not just your body and not just your skills, but your self-perception. You begin to believe deeply that you are capable of more. And that belief, grounded in behavior, is unshakable. That's why forcing consistency is one of the most powerful things you can do, not just for your goals, but for your identity. Because it tells your system over and over again, I can trust myself. I keep promises to myself. I act regardless of mood. That's the foundation of self-respect. And self-respect is the raw material of resilience. People think resilience is about pushing through crises. That's part of it. But real resilience is built in the quiet moments. It's built every time you act when it's easier not to. Every time you take one more step, one more rep, one more session. That micro resilience built consistently becomes macro resilience. It becomes your default. And when the real storms come, and they always come, you don't panic. You don't collapse because you've rehearsed strength in the small things. This is also why it's essential to attach your consistency not just to outcomes, but to processes. If your consistency is outcome dependent, only showing up when you're seeing results, you're setting yourself up for failure. Why? Because results are lagging indicators. They show up after the work has been done, often long after. But process is a leading indicator. It's in your control. You can control how often you show up. You can control the structure of your effort. And if you learn to love the process, to find meaning in the repetition itself, you become invincible. And here's a truth most people won't tell you. Even after years of practice, you'll still have days where it feels like a grind. The idea that it ever becomes truly effortless is a myth. What changes is your relationship to effort. You stop resisting it. You stop resenting it. You simply accept it. You say, this is the cost of excellence, and I'm willing to pay it. That's what it means to force consistency, not with tension, not with violence, but with willingness, with clarity, with commitment that doesn't waver when comfort disappears. There's also a biological reality here. Every time you resist short-term pleasure for a long-term purpose, you strengthen the prefrontal cortex. That's the seat of executive function. It governs focus, decision-making, and impulse control. And every time you give in to distraction, you reinforce the limbic system, the emotional brain. So forcing consistency is not just about character, it's about neuroarchitecture. You're literally changing the dominant pathways in your brain, and over time, those changes shift the entire way you experience life. You become more focused, more patient, more grounded. That's the real prize. But again, none of this happens if you wait to feel ready. None of this happens if you act only when the stars align. It happens when you act in the rain, when you act in doubt, when you act in fatigue, because that's when you're actually building something. That's when you're proving something, not to the world, but to yourself. And let me tell you something important. Discipline is not a punishment. It is not deprivation. It is not suffering for the sake of suffering. Discipline is freedom. It's the ability to move through life with clarity and direction. It's the tool that allows you to close the gap between what you want and what you do. And the only way to sharpen that tool is to use it daily, especially when you don't want to, especially when it's inconvenient. That's where the reps count the most. Every time you override an excuse, you make the next override easier. Every time you take action without permission from your mood, you rewire your response patterns, and the accumulation of those overrides becomes a kind of internal gravity, a force that pulls you toward action by default. You go from needing to push yourself to feeling pulled, but again, that pull is earned. It's a function of thousands of small decisions made in private. It's the quiet discipline that no one applauds, but that changes everything. You need to understand something else. Being consistent doesn't mean being perfect. It means showing up, even in small ways, even when imperfect. It means missing a step, but never missing twice. It means recognizing when you're drifting and course correcting quickly, without drama. Perfection is brittle. It shatters under pressure. But consistency is flexible. It bends, adapts, and continues. If you hold yourself to the standard of consistency instead of perfection, you create a sustainable system, one you can live with, one you can grow in, and growth. That's the ultimate goal, isn't it? Not to coast, not to stagnate, but to evolve. And evolution requires stress. It requires load. You have to place your system under demand that exceeds its current capacity. That's how adaptation works. That's how you grow muscle, skill, tolerance, patience. So stop avoiding the work because it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. That's the signal. That's the requirement. That's the path. Force yourself to be consistent, not because it's easy, not because it's fun, but because it is the only path to mastery, to meaning, and to self-respect. Every day you delay is another day your patterns deepen. Your identity hardens. Your resistance calcifies. Don't wait. Act. Repeat. Build. Not for the world, not for applause, but for yourself. Because in the end, you are the only one who will live with the consequences of your consistency or your lack of it. Consistency is not a single choice. It is thousands of small, mundane, quiet decisions that accumulate over time. And those decisions, those repetitions, become who you are. They etch into your biology, literally altering the chemical signaling and circuitry of your brain. When people talk about rewiring, this is not metaphorical. This is measurable. Repetition, especially repetition under tension, leads to long-term potentiation. That means synapses strengthen. Responses become faster. What once took willpower becomes automated. But the only way to reach that threshold is through repetition, through showing up before it's easy. There will be days when you will not want to show up, when your body is tired, when your mind is foggy, when your spirit is discouraged. That is not a failure. That is the arena. That is the proving ground. Your nervous system doesn't care about the calendar. It cares about inputs. If you feed it action when it expects withdrawal, you begin to shift its baseline. You begin to change what normal feels like. That shift is how you become the kind of person who acts first and questions later, who trains, writes, works, learns, builds, not because it's convenient, but because it's coded into their operating system. You are not your thoughts, you are not your feelings, you are your actions. Behavior is the interface between the internal world and the external one. You could have the most motivated mind in the world, but without behavior, it changes nothing. Likewise, you could have doubt, fatigue, distraction. But if your behavior remains aligned with your goals, you still win. Behavior is king, not feelings, not thoughts, action. So ask yourself, what do you want to be automatic in your life? What behaviors do you want to execute without hesitation, without resistance? Visualize them. Now reverse engineer the process of installing them. It will start with resistance. It will start with force. That's normal. That's expected. It means you're trying to upgrade the system. But you must do it again and again. Action, repetition, reflection, correction, action again. There is no hack around this. There is no shortcut. This is the way. And in this process, rest is part of consistency. Recovery is not the opposite of effort. It is a requirement for sustained effort. But don't confuse recovery with avoidance. Rest is planned. Rest is earned. It is deliberate space that enhances your ability to persist. Avoidance is reactive. It's what happens when you don't have a plan. So build rest into your system. Make it part of the architecture, but when the time for action comes, act, no delay, no debate, just move. And there's a certain dignity that comes with forced consistency. It's the dignity of knowing you are the author of your day, that you can steer even when the winds are against you, that you can show up and execute in a world that rewards distraction. That dignity builds an internal strength that no one can give you and no one can take away. It doesn't show up on social media. It doesn't need to. It shows up in the way you carry yourself, in the way you speak to yourself, in the way you confront challenge, not with panic, but with process. And don't underestimate the power of the mundane, the walk you didn't skip, The cold shower you didn't postpone, the chapter you read, the sentence you wrote, the rep you pushed through. These things seem small, but they are not. They are the bricks in the wall of your becoming. Every repetition strengthens a behavior, and every missed repetition strengthens the absence of that behavior. There is no neutral in neuroplasticity. You're always shaping, always coding, so ask yourself daily, what am I reinforcing right now? You cannot outsource this process. No one can build your consistency for you, no coach, no partner, no program. Others can support, but you must show up. You must feel the friction and still act. You must take the reins of your biology and say, we are doing this no matter what. Not from cruelty, from clarity, from a recognition that your time is finite and that every day you drift is a day you train your nervous system to drift. And yes, this process is lonely sometimes. That's part of the deal. You will look around and see others choosing ease. You will feel the pull of comfort. You will question your own path. But understand this, most people never get what they want because they never learn to delay gratification. They trade the temporary high for long-term emptiness. You don't have to do that. You can choose differently. You can train your brain to prefer the long game, to seek the quiet satisfaction that comes not from indulgence, but from alignment. There's a recalibration that happens when you force consistency long enough. Things that once felt impossible begin to feel inevitable, not because the world changed, but because you did. Your thresholds changed, your bandwidth increased. You adapted to the stress and became someone who can carry more. That's real progress, not just in outcomes, but in capacity. And that kind of progress multiplies everything you touch. Your work, your health, your relationships, your peace. Because at its core, consistency is peace. It's knowing that you are doing what you said you would do, that your internal and external worlds are aligned, that you are not living in a state of cognitive dissonance where your actions betray your values, that peace doesn't come from the absence of effort, it comes from the integrity of action, from the quiet confidence that builds when you keep promises to yourself. So keep going, force the behavior until it becomes you, act when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because that is the price of mastery. That is the price of self-respect. That is the price of becoming the person who no longer negotiates with the bare minimum, the person who doesn't need hype because they've built habits, the person who doesn't wait for perfect conditions because they've built the capacity to act in imperfect. And if you fall short, because you will, start again. Immediately, not tomorrow, not Monday, now. Consistency is not about never missing. It's about never quitting. It's about shrinking the gap between failure and re-engagement. One bad meal doesn't break a diet. One skipped session doesn't ruin training. But quitting does. The faster you get back in motion, the more resilient your consistency becomes, the more anti-fragile your system becomes. Use every slip as training, as a rep in recovery. That's where real discipline is built, not in perfection, but in repair. You are training your nervous system every single day. Whether you realize it or not, you are either training it to act or training it to hesitate, training it to face discomfort or to flee from it, training it to delay gratification or to demand immediacy. What you repeat, you reinforce. So choose your repetitions wisely. Choose your discomfort wisely. And when in doubt, when you feel the friction, the fatigue, the resistance, remember this, you are not trying to feel better. You are trying to be better. You are not chasing ease. You are cultivating excellence. And that is never a painless process, but it is a beautiful one forged in discipline, in repetition, in small, consistent steps that over time change everything.